welcome back everybody to We the People Insider. I'm 412 Anon, and I'm joined today by Breaking Spectre to bring you guys another episode of Zooming In. Today's episode is called California Burning, and Spectre is going to take you through a bunch of different things related to the California campfire that was happening a few days back. Spectre, take it away, man.
Sounds good. So as 412 just mentioned here, we'll just call this one California Burning. And this highlights a lot of the activities and fires and whatnot that have transpired since around the 8th, which, if you recall, kind of served as a little bit of a distraction away from all the stuff that's been going on with the election stuff in Florida, Georgia, and Arizona. But it seemed to warrant its own piece here, so we'll get into that here. So starting off, we'll talk about the campfire up north. And around the 8th, I believe it was, we saw Zero Hedge come through with the article, "The Whole Town is Gone." And this was talking about Paradise, California here, where basically the whole area was wiped clean. And I'll predicate this up front and say that there's a lot of video evidence in that here that I opted to put in. In the interest of time, obviously, we're not going to be able to play every single one of these. It'd just take too long. So the addresses are there if you guys want to plug that back in and go look at those. In the future, yeah, we might actually have some downloadable stuff for you here. So stay tuned on that. But in the meantime, USA Today had some interesting footage there as well. And we saw a couple things come through, a tweet come through talking about the campfire, James Woods, SoCal, fire, James Woods. One of the most incredible images we've seen. This is a town of Paradise, and the flag was still standing unburned. And we also saw New York Post come through. A woman warned about sparks from power lines day before deadly fire. This was as of the 13th. So keep tabs on that. We are going to touch on that here later on. And a couple more articles come through. The Epoch Times, tens of thousands flee fast-moving North Carolina fire up Oroville, California. Thousands of people were ordered to evacuate the fire that exploded in size on November 8th. And there's also a video here highlighting a guy that went back through seeing all these charred cars, including bodies inside the cars. Quite interesting.
Yep.
And there's also the map here of the fire structure status at that time. And somebody had already made the meme, Paradise Lost, 11/8/18, and see the map and some tweets and so forth and that on the inset. And somebody also happened to point out the queue on the entrance to the Paradise town side.
Oh, yeah, look at that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And somebody from Santa Rosa says, "What type of forest fires, quote unquote, leave trees intact but vaporize homes without a trace? Appliances, granite countertops, toilets, textiles, stonework, etc. completely vanished? Now, firefighters reported it's like we've been nuked, never seen anything like it. On the other hand, military intelligence agencies recently announced publicly that they've been testing directed energy weapons mounted to aircraft."
Wow.
Stay tuned on that. We are going to touch on that side as well.
That is a good point, though. All that stuff, the granite countertops, appliances, toilets, textiles, stonework, all gone, but yet you still see foliage.
Yeah, I think the key thing to highlight here is that what you're probably hearing on the Mockingbird media, and I've heard it ad nauseum, they're calling it these forest fires or what have you, and that's just not true. Wildfires, like, it's wiping the slate clean, and in many cases what we're seeing here through picture evidence, eyewitness accounts, is that is not the case. How can you have foliage and that's still standing but the house completely charred, burnt to the ground, clean slate?
Right.
So that being said, just down the way is Oroville, which was in the news quite a bit February 2017 about the dam, if you recall. And at that time, there were some articles that came through, including Zero Hedge activists warned officials about Oroville Dam 12 years ago, but nothing was done about it. So obviously it's showing neglect in terms of some of their key infrastructure.
Hmm.
At that time, here's a couple graphics net showing the Oroville situation, showing possible inundation areas, as well as progression times for that water to flow out should the dam have crested. And another quick article here states Oroville Dam disaster is latest in series of California government corruption, in which Jerry Brown himself has recently come under scrutiny as well after February 1st, 2017. Report by the LA Times revealed that Governor Brown still retained a $15 million in campaign funds with no clear guidelines as to how he would spend it. Now, the story follows reports that Brown's chief of staff, Nancy McFadden, took over $1 million from Pacific Gas and Electric Company and continue to hold stocks in PG&E despite playing a key role in the appointment process for new members of the State Public Utilities Commission, which regulates PG&E and other California utilities, including the
Wow.
ones behind the controversial plans for San Onofre's nuclear waste. Pay attention to that going forward, folks. Again, like I said, we are going to touch on PG&E here. And of course, at the time, for those that follow Dave Hodges and the Common Sense Show, if you haven't heard or watched these episodes, I would encourage you to do so. Oroville Dam being sabotaged, a dire Oroville Dam update with Paul Preston from Agenda 21 Radio, and long-term dangers for Oroville Dam, talking again to Paul Preston, all of which had eyewitness accounts of folks on the ground witnessing the damage done and some of the neglect to the dam. Now, I want you to think about this for a second, okay? If paradise is wiped clean and the fire has indeed taken out as much of that land, what happens to all that rain in the event you get some flash flooding and the dam is just below? Isn't that going to put pressure on that dam?
Sure would.
I would tend to believe so. So I think we need to pay a lot of attention to this.
Yeah.
So that being said, we'll jump down to the Woolsey fire down south. And over the course of the week, we saw some things come through. The Woolsey fire in California is seen from GOES-16 weather satellite this afternoon. Smoke blowing out. Brianna Sachs had some interesting tweets about that as well, dating back to the 8th. A lot of video footage there as well. And we also had some of the celebrities as well get in on the action. Article here says from the stars to ashes, celebrities affected by California wildfires. And I think Gerard Butler and Alyssa Milano were a couple of them that were listed in there, about 10 or 12 that were affected. And we also see some of the aftermath of that to his place.
Wow.
And I will highlight here, go ahead.
Oh, no, it's just the amount of destruction done by these fires or whatever the heck it is. It's just a tons of carnage. It's crazy. Looking at these pictures, it's like breathtaking.
Yeah, that's going to get more interesting here shortly. Robbie Starbuck also highlighted the fact that these fires being so huge, have the ability to pretty much start their own weather systems. And we've seen this time and time again when these huge mega fires start, they get some of these fire-nados, a fire tornado. And this was caught on the right-hand side on video as well. So aside from that, there's a lot of outrage amongst the folks down that way as California wildfires burn toxic nuclear site. And this particular article highlights that. Swaths of northern and southern California last week, claiming at least 48 lives, a state record for deaths attributable to such fires. But some locals were fearing yet another danger, which seems even less controllable than the killer blazes. And that was the fact that this nuclear site was getting hit with these fires and kicking up nuclear garbage into the smoke, which is going to get passed through the state. So within that article, there's a pair of tweets from Don Peterson. Call the DTSC director, Barbara Lee. Tell her the risk and failed to warn us. The smoke has a potential for radioactive carcinogenic contamination from Santa Susana Field. Stacey Hurst also highlighted this and says that this was a campaign issue we have been working with Newsom on. Boeing owns the site and has refused a cleanup while 50-plus kids have been diagnosed with rare cancers.
Wow.
Not good.
Mm-mm.
So here's a map of the campfire. I believe this was as of maybe about Thursday. And some more footage here. ABC 11 had some good footage of the firefighters battling the Woolsey fire. And New York Times highlighted this. Actor James Woods is using Twitter to help spread the message about those searching for loved ones in the missing California fires. And this was an interesting one as well. Logic before authority. Look what happened just on the beach in Malibu, California. You'll be shocked. Now, I will say this. The beginning part of the video where it is highlighting the helicopter and cars and that on the beach, I think has been largely debunked. I think that they were able to find that that was actually part of a set for the American Horror Show TV series, I think on FX maybe. But within this particular video is another video of somebody with an eyewitness account describing what she was seeing at her property. And up there in the top right, one of the things that she highlights is that I'm seeing dead bees everywhere. And that's rather interesting. What would cause bees to suddenly drop out of the sky? Something.
I have no idea what would be causing that to happen, but just going back to what you said before about the debunked video, it's just a reminder, like we were talking about in our like little pre-call, how important it is to vet things like that when you see them before you go broadcasting them as news or as real, you know. So I saw that video with the helicopter down and all that stuff on the beach. It could be pretty convincing if you don't know what you're looking at.
Yeah, being this is California, I think we have to be especially careful for those of us outside of California and looking at this stuff, because keep in mind, where's the movie and TV industry and where do they build all these sets?
Right.
And so to the untrained eye, and thank God for the help of the artists on the chans helping to point this out, that yeah, this was indeed a set that they showed in the front half of that video. Also within that video, this wasn't spoken of, but I happened to catch this, is that the smoke, you can kind of clearly see the aerosols present either in the sky or in the smoke, where you get kind of that rainbowy type effect where the sun actually is hitting the aluminum particulates in the aerosols. And for those who pay attention to, I'll use the term chemtrails here, the proper term being geoengineering aerosols and whatnot. It's not uncommon to see the rainbow type effect on certain days in either the cloud formations, or I've personally witnessed on many occasions where you get kind of this rainbow halo around the sun. So it indicates the presence of all these particulates in these aerosols. So take a look at that video if you get the moment to do so. And in describing the Santa Ana conditions, this is a pretty good read. The gal indicates that in her 45 years living in San Diego County, her city of San Diego, the winds across the mountains where Santa Ana winds can blow your car right off the road. These winds do happen, but they only get very strong in canyons, which is why they named after a canyon. And I won't read through all that, but I'll close with saying this. The news seems to be lying about everything all the time, and it's gotten to the point that anyone with a job in media parrots a script. Isn't that the truth?
Yeah. I mean, if you just go and you look at the different mainstream media outlets every day, you could definitely find distinct patterns in the way they and the talking points, the different phrases they'll use to describe something or someone or an event. You'll notice the same words and the same general concepts kind of being perpetuated by all of these different media companies out in the mainstream. So
4 a.m. talking points by chance?
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, we were just talking just prior to this recording, the fact that they're calling all these wildfires. Well, most of us would tend to believe a wildfire would be something that basically wipes everything in its path clean.
Mm-hmm.
And the evidence does not seem to suggest that, as we'll show here. So this is what we saw. Now pay attention to the center here. They're highlighting this bridge that got burned out, which is interesting. The steel is not melted, but yet the asphalt is burned through.
Interesting.
How is that possible?
Yeah, and I mean, you could see green still on the trees and the
Mm-hmm.
bushes, like on the either side of it. It doesn't make any sense.
So pictographical images here indicate, we got burned foliage in some cases. In other cases, we cars that are just burned out and nothing else touched. Hot enough to melt the aluminum rims off this thing. And I mean, just some incredibly apocalyptic looking pictures here. The
Look at
one
that.
down in
Look at that one in the middle, like just that like rectangular gap just missing out of the road. Like what the hell caused that?
mm-hmm, it's crazy. And you got cars on the freeway there where the boat is catching fire, but it missed and jumped 2 or 3 cars. You got the bottom right one there where the fire was hot enough to melt only partially the side of a car. And then the top one with the circles on it indicates, yep, there's all the trees in that were untouched, but yet the houses in that are leveled. Nothing left, just pure ashes.
It's crazy.
Yeah, so you got to look at this with a skeptical eye, and what you see on the Mockingbird media and what you hear. And does it pass a smell test? I don't think it does.
No, I mean not even close.
So counter the narrative. That's kind of what we're doing here. And what did we see? Daily Caller come through and says Jerry Brown says hundreds of billions needed for global warming adaptation. And another article there, State and Climate Change for California Wildfires by Breitbart. Both a couple interesting articles and takes, obviously depicting there's a complete lack of evidence. And Natural News countered that. I think Mike Adams actually penned this particular article this week and says an IQ test. If California fires are caused by climate change and CO2 emissions are driven by cars, then aren't cars responsible for starting the wildfires? So, according to liberal ideology, climate change is a radicalization of weather events caused by carbon dioxide emissions from automobiles that run on petroleum. This belief, of course, rests on the absurd notion that forest fires, hurricanes, and droughts never took place before the invention of the combustion engine. But let's set aside factual history for the moment so we can follow the liberal myth that claims the Earth was a calm, pristine, disasterless planet right up until about 1920, when the combustion engine went into mass production. I love his sense of humor, but I mean, this is what we have to try and counter, folks.
Yeah, the whole global warming con is getting blown way out of proportion. It's there is no evidence whatsoever that there is man-made cause global or climate change. I mean, climate's change. It's what they do.
Yeah, that's why we have seasons.
Exactly.
So, before it's news, not my usual repertoire of articles to look at, but this was an interesting one. If you get the opportunity, go back and look at this one. California arsonist caught. Video proof that firestorms were started. Interesting read. And Trump also came through and says he just approved an expedited request for a major disaster declaration for the state of California, wanted to respond quickly in order to alleviate some of the incredible suffering going on. I am with you all the way. God bless all the victims and families affected. And also, because of all the fires, there's a lot of smoke in the air. And I think there was an article on Zero Hedge on Friday that depicts the blowing the smoke up north, especially towards San Francisco, where people were complaining about the air quality. The bottom graphic there that you see with the greens, yellows, reds, for the last 8 days, the air quality has been pretty much terrible. And then just yesterday, an article had come through about Uber drivers not passing out masks. And you can kind of see the tweet above there folks may be charging a premium for these masks
Wow.
as well, knowing that they're scarce. And as of Friday, RT says California war zone, 63 killed, 600 plus missing in a raging wildfire. And I think that number has since gone up.
Wow.
Not good.
630 missing people.
Yep. So, yet another $1 trillion unfunded liability. Talking about the California population, the part of the cost of living that's devoted to insurance will soar as a direct result of California's asleep at the switch population management policy. Now, Q has had a little bit to say about this, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. We see the letter, 8-page letter. I'll show you just the first page of that from the governor to POTUS regarding the state of affairs. And like I said, Q has had a little bit to say about this, which he highlights first back on July 30th in Post 1762. And in it, he says, what happens when California is in serious debt and lost priority aid from the Fed government due to sanctuary status? Illegal. Light fires, declare state of emergency, and request billions from Fed. Why did POTUS reject in the past? Sick people, the more you know. And he highlights these articles out of Washington Post, Forbes, and LA Times.
Wow. Yeah. If what Q is saying is true, it is just absolutely disgusting what's happening in California. If they're setting these fires just to extort, funds from the federal government, I really hope this is exposed.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, it plays right into the Cloward Piven strategy, trying to destroy from the top down, bottom up, squeeze the middle type strategy.
Yep.
Attack from all sides, try and bankrupt the system so that they can roll out their own version of what needs to happen. Part of the Hegelian dialectic as well.
Yep.
And Q also re-mentioned this again on the 10th of November in Post 2467, calling out Trump's tweet, there's no reason for these massive fires, highlights the neglect. There was a graphic there that called attention back to Q Post 1762. Do you believe in coincidences? How many coincidences before it becomes mathematically impossible? Expand your thinking. Amount of fires in California past 12 months, 10 years. Date, Fed funding cut off from California as a result of violations of sanctuary state city. Budget cuts past 12 months, fire and prevention. Reduce, eliminate, dry brush cleanup, tree line cleanup, fire break installations, chopper flyovers to target high exposure areas, population areas exposure and fire break safety management, use of inmates, correction facilities for highway cleanup and dry brush removal. What is the primary purpose of declaring a state of emergency? What determines the size of the Fed payment to a state that has declared a state of emergency? What is the current debt of California? The more you know. And I think the last figure I heard was something in the neighborhood of like 1.3 trillion, I think, is their current debt.
Wow.
And here's
it doesn't surprise me with the way they handle their finances in that state. Just how socialized it is. Of course, they're going to be broke.
Absolutely. And this graphic from a Zero Hedge article yesterday highlights the deadliest wildfires, which the campfire, hands down, has taken the lead on. And I think,
like you said, it's not really a wildfire. I mean, it burned down towns and kind of left the wild alone in a lot of places, it looks like.
Right. And so 2018, 2017, Tubbs was up there from last year. It would have ranked number 3. And I think there's a couple other ones, Redwood Valley in 2017 as well, the Carr Fire in Redding in 2018, Atlas in 2017, Cascade in 2017. Just quite an uptick over the last 2-3 years alone. So, as I said before, we briefly touched on pg&e, and one of the things we'll touch on here, Breitbart came through with an article, Southern California Edison reported malfunction before wildfire began. They highlighted that there was a circuit operated by the company malfunction minutes prior to the Woolsey Fire's eruption. And so here's a quick map It shows the location of the fires: Campfire, Woolsey Fire, and then it also highlights PG&E's service area. Now, as of yesterday, I think this is the latest and greatest incident map highlighting where all these fires are, so you can kind of see that again. And we'll talk about PG&E, the fact that their power lines may have sparked a deadly campfire. And they disclosed Friday it had detected an outage on a transmission line about 15 minutes before the fire was reported. And as a result, their stocks plummeted, drawing down billions on its revolvers. So I think they had about 2.3 billion worth that they could draw on, which will likely quickly get exhausted, and will probably put pressure on those customers to. I'm sure they'll pass that cost on to their customers to try and recover.
Oh yeah, if you watched, I know you're going to allude to this in a minute here. But if you watch Sean's video over at SGT Report on this, Governor Moonbeam over there passed a bill which basically allows for that to happen.
Yeah, it's just disgusting.
Yeah, it really is.
So here's a quick chart as of Friday. PG&E's stock, San Francisco-based company, lost about $12 billion in market value since the campfire started through Wednesday, when its shares plunged the most in 16 years. Holders of $18 billion worth of bonds that are currently rated investment grade are bracing for the utility's credit rating to be cut to junk, making PG&E one of the biggest quote-unquote fallen angels in years. And a little bit more color around that. It also shows their bonds and credit default swap, CDS, that you see there are also dropping. In conjunction, it's taken out the hedge funds that have also invested into PG&E as well. And an interesting point here that this Santa Claus of the U.S. highlights, speaking about PG&E, to prevent his family's fortune from being lost due to inheritance laws, he prohibited female relatives from receiving a direct inheritance, a rule that encouraged women to marry their relatives. Really? Incest? And he pointed to Donald Trump. And so I think what he's talking about there is a Rothschild stake in PG&E here.
Right.
Which is exactly right. And as you brought up, yes, Sean over at SGT Report, I think in this particular video, Space Weather, Rothschild, and Agenda 21 highlights the PG&E Rothschild connection. And we also found out through PG&E's news releases that they engaged diverse owned banks for $2.7 billion in bond sales in 2014. And the financial transactions reflect PG&E's commitment to supplier diversity. So this was again December 16, 2014, and their commitment to diversity and inclusion. PG&E employed 11 diverse-owned investment banks to help manage offerings of more than $2.7 billion in notes in 2014. Now, in the biggest deal ever led by a diverse underwriter for PG&E, Ramirez Securities acted as the lead underwriter on a $900 million bond offering this year. The transaction included 5 other diverse firms as co-managers: Loop Capital, Blaylock B.O. Van, Lebenthal, MFR Securities, and Mishler Financial Group. Wait a minute, haven't we heard of Loop Capital before?
I think we have.
So what has Q got to say about that? Well, Q had pointed to us in that direction on post 464 dating back to January 5th about Loop Capital. Again on post 480, 524, 1019, and 1354, and those are highlighted for you there. Basically, follow the money at Loop Capital Markets. He said on January 6th, do not lose focus on Loop Capital. Highlighted again, 13th of January, Loop Capital. Follow the loop. So obviously, we need to pay attention to the financial side and who all they're tied to, and PG&E is right dead center of it.
Yep, follow the money. Always got to follow the money.
Absolutely. So, that being said, 2018 happens to be the year forest fires forgot the forests. Do you know why?
Wow.
And that's a good segue into this stuff. Talking about direct energy weapons. So, a couple of tweets came through. Mike Tokes, I am seeing more and more videos of the strange irregularities regarding the California fires. In this video, single homes were burned down with no damage to neighboring homes. Can anyone explain this? And Paul highlights this. DEW are starting the wildfires in California. What is going on? He's got a pair of tweets there. So that led to some memes being generated. We will call it forest fires. Watch out for that corporate gas station, Roger.
Wow.
Never mind, the structures around and trees are perfectly okay, but the rest of the thing is completely burned down.
I just don't understand how people could see these kind of pictures and just swallow the mainstream narrative on this. I mean, this is wild. Look at that.
Yeah,
It looks like these buildings were demolished. Not like a fire came through and just burned everything in its path. It looks like something targeted these buildings and took them down without doing a whole lot of damage to the surrounding areas.
yeah, it's profound.
Yeah.
So, what direction did the quote unquote wildfire approach from? Very good questions we should be asking. And so here's some of the evidence. We did see some stuff, some directorates net from the Secretary of the Air Force that does highlight this. I think this dates back to October 21st, 2011. The directive establishes Air Force directed energy weapons safety policy. Directed energy weapons provide unprecedented capabilities and produce a broad spectrum of hazards. There on the right hand, you can see some stuff dating back to 1967. I think the bottom one is around 1970 or 79. It's tough to read there, but research in support of the NWC Weather Modification Program, progress in engineering weather modification experiments by computer modeling, Project Storm Fury operations 1967, flight studies of glaciation and clouds at -4 to -6C, Office of Naval Research Program and Weather Modification. So this all ties together, folks. Everything with these direct energy weapons, geoengineering, all of it works in concert to likely do exactly what we have seen here.
Yeah, it would appear that way.
And just this week, I think this article is from Thursday, Pentagon wants more money for lasers to shoot down drones and missiles, which in that very article that talks about the satellite megawatt particle beam was within a decade of becoming a reality. We need to have 100 kilowatt class weapons on Army theater vehicles. We need to have 300 kilowatt class weapons on Air Force tankers, Griffin said. Military Times reported at the time. We need to have megawatt class directed energy weapons in space for space defense. These are things we can do over the next decade if we maintain our focus. Folks, I don't think we have to wait a decade. I think those things are already here. I
See,
think if anybody with a reasoned mind knows anything about the military, that the technology is at least 50 years ahead of what we're seeing here today via DARPA.
right.
So this is a little bit of a misnomer. Maybe this is a misinformation campaign in this particular article. I got to believe that these 300 kilowatt class weapons on tankers probably is already here.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah,
And
it really is.
if you need further proof, I might suggest you go back and look at these articles from 2015. This highlights the chemical plant fires over in China. Now, what was going on around that time in August of 2015? Obama was still in office. There had been some stuff on the financial side where there's been some gamesmanship going on with devaluing the yuan against the dollar at that time. And the powers that be, if you will, didn't like what they were seeing, and I think they sent a message at that time. So there was a lot of speculation at that time, unconfirmed, but speculated that the fires were caused by direct energy weapons. So it started off on August 12th with I Could Feel Death, massive explosion rocks Chinese port city, one of the first ones. A little over a week later, caught on tape, another huge chemical weapons warehouse explosion rocks China. And concluding on the 31st of August 2015, with China rocked by another massive chemical explosion.
Yeah, move along,
Crazy.
folks. Nothing to see here.
Exactly. So again, as we stated, aside from the direct energy weapons, geoengineering, I think, has certainly played a part in this. Seeing the aerosols in the sky there. And Dane Wigginton over at geoengineeringwatch.org has got some articles and pictures and that. I don't know how recent this particular map is, but does that look natural to you?
No, it sure does not.
No.
No, not even a little bit.
I think weather manipulation is certainly at play here, depriving the state of probably much needed rain at this point, keeping it at bay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm far from a meteorologist, but there definitely seems to be something weird going on when you see pictures like that.
Right. So geoengineering is fueling firestorm catastrophes. There's an article there you can go over to their website and take a look at, talking about the rapidly increasing extreme and deadly wildfire behavior on global warming alone. But is that what's really going on? Another article here that was rather interesting, Governor Newsom, geoengineering and unprecedented wildfires. Again, folks, you guys can go over to Geoengineering Watch and take a look at those. Within those are a couple videos. Wigington, Geoengineering Watch Global Alert News from November 10th, where he talks about what's been going on there. And there's also one, not on Geoengineering Watch, but a related one on the 11th, giant frontal system blocked. Weather controllers were taking a look at this as well. And if you need further proof, I would advise you to go back to this particular article by Natural News, 100 Years of Patents Reveal Secret History of U.S. Weather Control. I think this was updated from maybe about a 2010, 2012 article that was very similar in nature, where about 60 to 70 patents and that are on the books for manipulating the weather. Matter of fact, I think the directive still stands that the military's goal was to control the weather by the year 2025. So, all of this considered, folks, what is the agenda at hand here? Having just come off and talked to Sean on SGT Report the other day, he highlighted this Agenda 21, which in essence is Agenda 2030 for sustainable development.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of different agendas at play here. Scorched earth policy, whatever it is you want to call it, all of these are coming together to work in concert. Conceivably, we could say that these fires may be in the direct path of where this California high-speed rail system is. I haven't seen a direct overlay type map that would indicate that, but it certainly is suspicious nonetheless.
Yeah, this is definitely suspicious there when you look at that map of the fires and the high-speed railways. It's fascinating and
Yeah.
and terrifying when you think of what it is they're trying to accomplish here.
Right, because as part of Agenda 2030, the whole idea is to get people out of the countryside and into these mega cities. So how are they going to facilitate transport if you're boxed into a mega city? Well, to get back and forth, they don't want you to drive. God no, that indicates you have some level and semblance of freedom to be able to do what you need to do. Nope, you're going to go on government provided transportation between these mega cities if you're going to do anything.
Yep.
So aside from that, a good article from 2006 talking about the exclusive, the truth about La Raza, and behind the sea of red and green flags. And basically the key word out of that whole article is reconquista. Reconquista meaning to take over the land. Obviously, they have an agenda to retake back what they believe was stolen from previous wars. Where California, Arizona, New Mexico, all that area they think belongs to them. As part of this mindset of kind of like Black Lives Matter, you got to have retributions and whatnot given back to them. Well, there's a problem in that line of thinking because it's very short-sighted, one, but the whole world has been nothing but conquest. So you would have to go back and say, okay, if you think we're going to give back to you the land that you think we took, who are you going to give your land back to that conquered you? And how far back does this go?
Right.
All these reparations. It's just ridiculous thinking.
I agree with you.
And another side of this, to look at it from a financial perspective, is what's called creative destruction. Well, creative destruction refers to the incessant product and process innovation mechanism by which new production units replace outdated ones. Planned obsolescence. This restructuring process permeates major aspects of macroeconomic performance, not only long-run growth, but also economic fluctuations, structural adjustment, and the functioning of factor markets. Over the long run, the process of creative destruction accounts for over 50% of productivity growth. At business cycle frequency, restructuring typically declines during recessions, and this adds a significant cost of downturns. Obstacles to the process of creative destruction can have severe short and long run macroeconomic consequences. So, in essence, all of this is being planned, folks, at the end of the day. This is what they believe in. They don't want you to have prosperity, to do what you want to do. No, this is all being planned for you, what they think is the right thing to do. So I'm not going to go through this whole entire paper here, but I will pause if you guys want to pause and read this for yourself. And there's the addresses at the end here, an MIT article.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Feel free to pause this at any point, go back, and if there's anything that we went over too fast or that you want to take more time to read, you can always pause these videos and spend as much time on any particular part of these presentations.
And we wrap up with all the references, but it was you can find this at MIT's website there if you want to go read it directly from the site.
Great.
And last but not least, Breitbart highlights this from earlier this year. California Democrats oppose pro-Israel anti-boycott legislation, and what's been termed as this BDS stuff. Surely folks have probably heard about this. Basically, prevent boycotting of Israel, all about anti-Semitism and so forth. Now, this article does highlight the fact that Moonbeam did get legislation put through, and I believe is on the law books in California, preventing boycotting. But the Dems there have, in their infinite wisdom, decided that that's not good enough and we need to revert course. So what does this highlight? Aside from an agenda, is the spiritual side of things. And the Bible clearly says those who work favorably with Israel will be blessed, and those who don't will be cursed. And if you look at the confluence of events that have happened over the last several years in California, could it be without a shadow of a doubt that God is judging California for some of the decisions made? It's highly possible. I wouldn't put it past what we've seen. I think the evidence that we've seen might suggest that. But nonetheless, I'll put that out there for you to mull over.
Yeah, definitely something to think about.
But at the end of the day, Trump was just out there. He met with Moonbeam, Newsom, and those guys yesterday. And I think this picture pretty well says it all.
Yep.
He just looked absolutely disgusted at what he saw. And I don't know if it was necessarily what he saw, is probably what he knows and probably what intelligence is telling him. As Q is even referred to, that these guys are criminals.
Yeah, these people are sick.
These people are sick. And that's all I've got for today. That's kind of a round robin of what has happened just in the last week through California.
Wow. Well, fantastic job putting this together, Spectre. This is really interesting. And I hope all of you out there watching have enjoyed this as well. If you have, make sure you go ahead and smash that like button, share the link around, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you know when we upload more. Spectre, do you have any final thoughts to wrap this up?
No, stay tuned. We've got a lot of things planned, as I alluded to early on. I think in the next couple months here, once we get our feet under us a little bit more here, plan on trying to get the interactive side of things going to where you can actually go delve into what I am presenting here and actually click on the links and go read a lot of this stuff for yourself. So stay tuned.
Awesome. I can't wait to see how this all develops and evolves. All right, everybody, you guys have a great day out there, and we will see you on the next one.